The quiet stitch. The soft glow of the oil lamp cast an unexpected request. The rhythmic clatter of the horse-drawn plow, usually the loudest sound across the Stoltzfus fields, was abruptly eclipsed by a foreign growl. Sarah, mending a tear in a worn denim overall on the porch swing, looked up, her needle suspended mid-stitch. A long, gleaming black automobile, unlike any she had ever seen up close, was slowly turning off the main road onto their gravel lane. Its polished surface reflected the brilliant afternoon sun, a stark, shimmering contrast to the muted greens and browns of the surrounding farmland. Dust billowed in its wake, temporarily obscuring the cornstalks that lined their property. Her heart gave an unbidden flutter, a mixture of curiosity and a familiar, almost unwelcome apprehension. English visitors were not unheard of, but a car of this grandeur usually signaled something more significant than a simple purchase from their roadside stand. The vehicle pulled to a silent stop near the porch, its engine humming softly before falling quiet. The driver, a young man in a crisp uniform, emerged and opened the rear door with a deferential bow. From the opulent interior stepped a woman who seemed to have materialized from a glossy magazine. Her dress, a tailored dove gray, moved with an effortless grace Sarah knew could only come from expensive fabric. A perfectly coiffed blonde bob framed a face that, despite its evident poise, held a glint of something sharp and determined in her eyes. This was Mrs. Eleanor Miller, a name Sarah had heard whispered in the local mercantile, always associated with wealth and an air of untouchable sophistication. "Good afternoon, Miss Stoltzfus." Mrs. Miller's voice was clear, precisely articulated, and carried a faint, almost musical lilt. She offered a small, polite smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I trust I haven't arrived at an inconvenient time." Sarah, still holding the overall, rose from the swing. "No, ma'am. You are welcome." Her voice, usually soft, felt a little breathy in her own ears. "How may I help you?" Mrs. Miller's gaze swept over Sarah, taking in her plain blue dress, the neatly tied prayer cap, and then, lingering for a moment, her hands. "I am Eleanor Miller. My daughter Clara is to be married in 3 months. We are rather particular about the details." She paused, a hint of something resembling a practiced patience in her expression. "I've heard, through various channels, that your handiwork is exceptional, that you possess a rare talent for transforming fabric into something truly exquisite." A blush warmed Sarah's cheeks. Praise, particularly from an Englishwoman of Mrs. Miller's stature, always made her feel a little awkward. "I try to do my best, ma'am." Mrs. Miller took a step closer, her gaze now fixed intently on Sarah's face. "My request, Miss Stoltzfus, is rather unusual. I would like you to make Clara's wedding dress." The words hung in the air, weighted with an unspoken grandeur. A wedding dress, for an English bride. The thought sent a jolt of both excitement and trepidation through Sarah. She had crafted countless dresses, sturdy work clothes, and delicate baby garments, but never a wedding dress of such significance, for someone outside her community. The styles, the expectations, the very fabrics would be entirely different. "A wedding dress, ma'am?" Sarah repeated, her brow furrowing slightly. "For an English wedding?" Mrs. Miller nodded, a subtle tightening around her lips. "Indeed. I understand this might be outside your usual commissions. However, I am convinced you are the only one who can achieve the vision Clara and I have for her special day. We want something unique, handcrafted, with a soul, if you will, that only true artistry can provide. My daughter's fiancé, a Mr. Alistair Finch, is from a rather prominent family. Appearances, naturally, are paramount." Sarah looked towards the fields, where her father and younger brother were still working, oblivious to the imposing black car and its elegant occupant. The sheer audacity of the request was exhilarating. It was a challenge, a testament to her skill, a window into a world she only ever glimpsed from afar. But it was also daunting. The English world was fast-paced, unpredictable, full of unspoken rules and dazzling complexities. I would be honored, Mrs. Miller, Sarah finally managed, her initial apprehension battling with a blossoming sense of purpose. I will do my very best for your daughter. A genuine smile, softer than her previous polite one, finally touched Mrs. Miller's eyes. Excellent. I knew you would understand. We will, of course, provide all the materials, and a generous compensation for your time and artistry. She retrieved a small, ornate card from her purse. My address, and a number where you can reach me. Clara and I would like to meet with you at your earliest convenience to discuss the design. As Mrs. Miller turned and gracefully re-entered her car, Sarah found herself clutching the card, its smooth, thick paper a stark contrast to the rough cotton of the overall still dangling from her hand. The black car reversed with silent efficiency, turned onto the main road, and disappeared as quickly as it had arrived, leaving behind only a fading cloud of dust and the lingering scent of something expensive and foreign. Sarah stood there for a long moment, the hum of the distant plow now a comforting presence, her mind already sketching designs, fabric textures, and the intricate lacework of an English wedding gown. The quiet rhythm of her life had just been profoundly and beautifully disrupted. The grand house and a protective gaze. The gravel crunched under Sarah's borrowed buggy wheels as she turned off the main road, the sound unusually loud in the afternoon quiet. Sunlight, filtered through ancient oaks, dappled the winding drive that led to the Miller estate. Grand was an understatement. The house, a sprawling edifice of pale stone and dark timber, rose majestically against the clear sky, its gables and chimneys reaching like silent sentinels. Manicured lawns stretched out on either side, emerald green and impossibly smooth, dotted with sculpted hedges and beds of vibrant, unfamiliar flowers. It was a world away from the neat, unassuming farmhouses of her own community, a testament to wealth she had only ever glimpsed in passing English cars or whispered tales. A maid, dressed in a crisp uniform, answered the heavy oak door, her smile polite but distant. Sarah, clutching her measuring tape and a small notebook, felt a familiar blush creep up her neck. The foyer alone was larger than her entire living room, with a gleaming marble floor and a towering chandelier that glittered like frozen starlight. Every surface seemed to reflect light. Every object spoke of careful curation and expense. Miss Stoltzfus? Mrs. Miller is expecting you in the solarium. Please, follow me. Sarah followed, her gaze darting from the intricately carved banister of the grand staircase to the oil paintings adorning the walls, each one a masterpiece of color and shadow. The air itself felt different here, perfumed with something floral and expensive, a stark contrast to the familiar scent of wood smoke and fresh bread that clung to her own home. The solarium was a conservatory of glass, bathed in warm, bright light, filled with exotic plants that thrived in the artificial warmth. Clara Miller, a vision in a soft blue dress, rose from a wicker chair, a genuine smile lighting her face. Sarah, I'm so glad you're here. Mama just stepped out, but she said to make sure you have everything you need. Clara's voice was light and welcoming, easing some of Sarah's apprehension. It's good to be here, Clara, Sarah replied, her voice softer than usual. She opened her notebook, her practical tools a grounding presence amidst the unfamiliar luxury. Are you ready for your measurements? Clara laughed, a sound like wind chimes. As ready as I'll ever be. This whole wedding business is a bit overwhelming, to be honest. Mama has very particular ideas. She gestured for Sarah to begin. As Sarah moved around Clara, her hands deft and professional, taking careful note of each curve and line, she felt a presence in the doorway. She didn't look up immediately, accustomed to focusing entirely on her task, but the shift in the room's atmosphere was palpable. Clara, too, seemed to notice, a slight stiffening in her posture. David, Clara said, her voice a little more subdued. You're back. Sarah finally lifted her gaze. Standing framed in the doorway was a man who could only be Clara's brother, He was tall, with broad shoulders that filled the space, and dark hair that fell just so over his forehead. His eyes, a striking shade of deep blue, were fixed on Sarah with an intensity that made her pause. There was no smile on his face, no casual greeting, only a serious, almost watchful, expression. He wore a crisp white shirt, the sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms. "Just got in," David said, his voice a low rumble. It wasn't a harsh sound, but it carried an undeniable weight. His eyes, however, never left Sarah. They seemed to assess her, to weigh her, a quiet protectiveness simmering beneath the surface. It was a look Sarah had seen before, in the gaze of her own brothers when a stranger came too close, but never quite so focused, so unwavering from an Englishman. "This is Sarah Stoltzfus, David," Clara offered, a slight awkwardness in her tone. "She's making my wedding dress. Isn't it going to be beautiful?" David nodded slowly, his gaze still on Sarah. "I'm sure it will be," he said, his voice flat. He took a step into the solarium, his presence filling the already large room. He didn't offer a hand, didn't elaborate, simply stood there, observing. Sarah felt a strange pull, a flicker of something she couldn't quite name, beneath his serious scrutiny. It wasn't a hostile look, but rather one of profound interest, mingled with a clear, unyielding concern. It made her both acutely aware of her plain dress and cap, and surprisingly, bolstered her resolve. She met his gaze for a moment, her own brown eyes steady, before returning her attention to Clara, though she could still feel the warmth of his gaze on her back. The grand house, with all its opulence, suddenly felt very small indeed. Shared moments and kind eyes. The rustle of silk and the soft click of scissors filled the sewing room, a quiet counterpoint to the distant sounds of the sprawling estate. Sarah, perched on a velvet stool, meticulously pinned a delicate lace overlay to the bodice of Clara's wedding dress. The fabric, rich and shimmering, seemed to absorb the muted afternoon light filtering through the tall windows. David appeared in the doorway, a mug of steaming coffee in his hand. "Clara mentioned you might like some refreshment," he offered, his voice a low, even tone that cut through the silence without startling. He placed the mug on a small side table, well out of the way of her work. "Please, take a break if you need one." Sarah murmured a soft, "Thank you," her gaze briefly meeting his before returning to the intricate pattern of the lace. She was accustomed to the quiet solitude of her work, and the unexpected company, however unobtrusive, was a new experience. She felt a faint blush creep up her neck. He didn't leave immediately. Instead, he leaned against the doorframe, his presence a warm weight in the periphery of her vision. "That's incredibly detailed work," he observed, his eyes tracing the delicate embroidery. "It must require immense patience." "It does," Sarah admitted, a small smile touching her lips. "But there is beauty in patience, is there not?" David nodded, a thoughtful expression on his face. "Indeed, something many of us could learn from." He then excused himself, leaving a faint scent of coffee and something subtly masculine in his wake. Later that afternoon, as Sarah was carefully hand-stitching a pearl button onto a cuff, David returned. This time, he carried a small, leather-bound book. "I was wondering," he began, a slight hesitation in his voice, "if you might be interested in this. It's a collection of local bird species. I thought perhaps, since you appreciate nature." Sarah's fingers paused their delicate work. She took the book, its worn cover cool beneath her fingertips. "Oh," she breathed, genuinely surprised. "This is very kind." She opened it to a random page, revealing an exquisite watercolor illustration of a cardinal. A genuine smile bloomed on her face. David watched her, a quiet satisfaction in his eyes. He then settled into a chair across the room, seemingly engrossed in a financial newspaper, though Sarah occasionally caught his gaze drifting towards her. When he believed she wasn't looking, his expression softened, a gentle curiosity shining in his eyes. It wasn't the intense, almost protective stare she had observed the day before, but something warmer, more open. The sewing room, once a space of professional detachment, began to feel less like a temporary workspace and more like a shared corner of the house. David's appearances became a quiet rhythm, a comforting counterpoint to the steady hum of her work. He brought her a glass of freshly squeezed lemonade when the afternoon sun grew too warm, and once, a plate of shortbread cookies baked by the estate's cook. Each offering was small, simple, yet carried an undeniable weight of thoughtfulness. Sarah found herself anticipating his visits, a subtle flutter in her chest whenever she heard his footsteps approaching. She began to notice the small things, the way his dark hair fell across his forehead when he leaned forward, the slight crinkle at the corners of his eyes when he smiled, the quiet strength in his hands as he held a book or a mug. His smiles were not wide or boisterous, but soft, almost tender, and they seemed to be reserved solely for her. She, who had always found comfort in the familiar and the predictable, was now experiencing something entirely new. This unfamiliar warmth, this quiet pull towards a man from a world so different from her own, was both unsettling and undeniably pleasant. It was a feeling she couldn't name, a delicate thread weaving itself into the fabric of her quiet existence, promising a complexity she had never imagined. As the day drew to a close and the shadows lengthened in the sewing room, Sarah realized she was no longer merely observing David Miller. She was, in a quiet, undeniable way, beginning to feel him, and the thought, though daunting, was not unwelcome. Comfort and connections. The measuring tape, typically a tool of precise calculation, became a bridge between them. As Sarah meticulously adjusted the pins along Clara's bodice, a sigh escaped the bride-to-be, one heavy with more than just the anticipation of her wedding day. "Sometimes," Clara began, her voice soft, "I wonder if I'm ready for all of it. The expectations, the changes, it feels like a tidal wave." She gestured vaguely around the opulent room, then her gaze settled on Sarah, finding a quiet understanding there. "It's not just the dress, Sarah. It's everything." Sarah paused, her fingers still on a seam. She had never known the weight of such an elaborate wedding, her own community's ceremonies being far simpler, yet the essence of Clara's fear resonated. "Marriage is a journey," Sarah offered gently, her gaze meeting Clara's in the mirror. "Every journey has its unknown paths, but with faith and with love guiding you, you find your way, one step at a time." Clara turned slightly, her eyes wide with a fragile gratitude. "You make it sound manageable." A small, genuine smile touched her lips. "Thank you, Sarah. I needed to hear that." The tension in the room eased, replaced by a comfortable intimacy. Clara continued to confide, sharing anecdotes of her fiancé's family, the daunting guest list, and the pressures of combining two distinct lives. Sarah listened, offering quiet affirmations and the steadying presence of her calm demeanor. The bond between them deepened, woven thread by invisible thread. Later that afternoon, as the setting sun cast long shadows across the Miller estate, David found Sarah packing her sewing basket. "Sarah," he said, his voice a low timbre that always seemed to cut through the surrounding quiet. "I was wondering, I have a workshop on the property. I do some woodworking. If you'd be interested, I could show you around." His tone was casual, yet his eyes held a hopeful glint. Sarah hesitated, her gaze falling to the intricate patterns of the wedding gown laid out on the table. Her world was fabric and thread, wood and sawdust were foreign. Yet the invitation felt significant, a step beyond the polite interactions of the main house. I would like that, David," she replied, a faint blush rising on her cheeks. The workshop was a haven of raw timber and the sweet, earthy scent of sawdust. Tools of various sizes hung in neat rows, each a testament to meticulous craftsmanship. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating motes of dust dancing in the air. David, in his element, moved with a quiet confidence, his hands tracing the grain of a half-finished chest. "I find a certain peace in it," he explained, gesturing to the heavy oak workbench. "Taking something raw, giving it form, purpose. It's a quiet conversation between maker and material." Sarah's eyes, accustomed to the delicate intricacies of lace and silk, absorbed the robust beauty of the wood. She touched a smooth, planed surface, feeling the subtle warmth beneath her fingertips. "It is very different from my work," she mused, "but I see the care you put into it, the thought." They talked for hours. David spoke of the challenges of selecting the right timber, the satisfaction of a perfectly jointed corner, and the stories hidden within each piece of wood. Sarah, in turn, found herself sharing tales of her own craft, the nuances of different fabrics, the precision required for a perfect drape, and the joy of seeing a vision come to life in cloth. As twilight bled into night, painting the windows in shades of deep indigo, they found themselves seated on old wooden stools, a shared thermos of herbal tea between them. The conversation drifted from their crafts to their lives, their dreams, and the quiet rhythms of their days. David spoke of the sprawling land he hoped to cultivate one day, beyond the confines of his father's business. Sarah, for the first time with an English person, described the enduring strength of her community, the satisfaction of collective effort, and the spiritual nourishment she drew from her faith. The air between them crackled not with tension, but with a burgeoning connection, a silent understanding. David's gaze, when it met hers, held a depth that stirred something unfamiliar and warm within Sarah. He was not just Clara's brother. He was a man of quiet passions, of deep thought, and of an undeniable kindness that reached across the chasm of their different worlds. The workshop, once a foreign space, now felt like a sanctuary, a place where their disparate threads of life had begun to intertwine, subtly, beautifully. A spark ignites. The familiar rhythm of the sewing machine in her small workshop should have been a comfort, a steadfast companion in her solitary hours. Instead, its hum felt like a counterpoint to the insistent thrumming in Sarah's own chest. It had been days since her visit to David's workshop, and yet the scent of sawdust and cedar still clung to the edges of her memory, as did the image of his hands, strong and sure, shaping the raw wood. A strange warmth bloomed in her stomach whenever his name drifted unbidden into her thoughts, a sensation both exhilarating and profoundly unsettling. This feeling, so potent and new, was a dangerous distraction. She was an Amish woman, committed to her faith and her community. David was English. Their worlds were as distinct as the neatly pressed pleats of a Sunday dress and the chaotic swirl of a ballroom gown. To even entertain such thoughts felt like a betrayal, a straying from the path laid out for her. Yet, the memory of his thoughtful gaze, the gentle humor in his eyes, refused to be banished. He saw her, truly saw her, in a way few others did. He understood the quiet language of creation, the dedication etched into skilled hands. It was a connection she hadn't anticipated, a pull she couldn't ignore, no matter how hard she tried. Later that afternoon, a sudden, urgent knock startled her. It was Clara, her face a mask of mild panic. "Sarah, thank goodness you're here. The lining for the veil, it's a nightmare. The thread just keeps tangling and I'm making it worse." Sarah, ever the calm in a storm, followed Clara back to the main house. The dining room table, usually reserved for formal meals, was awash with a sea of delicate ivory tulle and shimmering silk. David was already there, attempting to untangle a particularly stubborn knot in a spool of fine silk thread, his brow furrowed in concentration. He looked up, a small smile touching his lips when he saw her. "The bride-to-be here is about to declare war on this veil," he said, his voice laced with amusement. "It's not funny, David, it's my veil," Clara protested, though a small smile played on her own lips. Sarah approached the table, her heart giving a peculiar lurch at the sight of him. The air seemed to thicken, charged with an unspoken energy. "Let me see," she said, her voice softer than usual. She reached for the spool David was holding, her fingers delicate and precise. As she took it from him, their hands brushed. It was the briefest of contacts, a fleeting spark, but in that instant, time seemed to halt. An electric current jolted through Sarah, from her fingertips straight to her core. Her breath hitched, and a blush crept up her neck, painting her cheeks a soft rose. David's eyes, a deep, thoughtful hazel, met hers. For a long moment, the world outside their shared gaze ceased to exist. His thumb, warm and calloused, had grazed the back of her hand, and the sensation lingered, a phantom touch that made her skin tingle. His own breath seemed to catch, and the slight parting of his lips suggested a similar shock. The air between them crackled, alive with an unspoken revelation. It was more than mere physical contact. It was an acknowledgement, a sudden, undeniable recognition of the burgeoning connection that had been quietly building between them. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat echoing the sudden acceleration of David's own pulse, a rhythm she somehow felt keenly. Clara, oblivious to the silent drama unfolding beside her, let out a frustrated sigh. "See? It's completely knotted." The spell was broken. Sarah quickly averted her gaze, her fingers suddenly clumsy as she took the spool. David cleared his throat, his cheeks also faintly flushed. "Right," he muttered, picking up another tangled length of fabric, his movements a little less fluid than before. But the moment had etched itself into Sarah's memory, indelible and profound. The accidental touch had ignited something undeniable, a silent declaration that their connection was more than just shared interests or respectful admiration. It was a spark, hot and bright, that promised either a glorious blaze or a dangerous conflagration. And in that moment, Sarah knew, with a certainty that both thrilled and terrified her, that she wanted to know which it would be. Troubled glances and confessions. The gentle tinkle of teacups, usually a comforting hum in the Miller household, scraped against Mrs. Miller's nerves that afternoon. She feigned interest in arranging a vase of peonies, her gaze, however, fixed on David. He leaned in, pointing out a delicate stitch on Clara's lace trim to Sarah, their heads close, a shared smile flitting between them. Sarah's nimble fingers traced the embroidery, a fleeting, innocent gesture, yet it sent a prickle of unease down Mrs. Miller's spine. She'd witnessed it before, a quiet magnetism whenever David and the young Amish woman occupied the same space. His lingering gaze, the subtle softening of his posture, the ready chuckle he offered to Sarah's rare, soft-spoken observations. And Sarah, typically so composed, seemed to unfurl under his attention, a faint blush often tinting her cheeks. Mrs. Miller had initially dismissed it as simple courtesy, David's innate kindness extending to their guest. But as the weeks drew on and the wedding dress neared completion, the glances between them multiplied, growing more significant, more laden with unspoken meaning. That very morning she'd observed them in the garden, David demonstrating how to prune a rose bush, his large hands carefully guiding Sarah's smaller ones. Sunlight caught Sarah's bonnet, illuminating a stray wisp of hair, which David gently tucked back. It was a domestic vignette, almost idyllic, yet it felt discordant, a breach of an invisible boundary, a silent transgression against the unwritten rules governing Sarah's world, and by extension, their own. Mrs. Miller sighed, the scent of the peonies suddenly cloying. This was not part of the arrangement. Later that evening, after a particularly long fitting, Sarah prepared to depart, her sewing basket nestled on her arm. David, as always, was there, offering to drive her back to her aunt's. Mrs. Miller watched from the doorway as they moved toward his car, twilight stretching long shadows before them. Just before reaching the vehicle, David paused, turning to face Sarah. He took her hand, a gesture that, even from a distance, vibrated with significance. Mrs. Miller couldn't discern their words, but she saw Sarah's head tilt, her bonnet obscuring her expression. Then David leaned closer, his voice a low murmur. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped within a cage. David's confession, whispered beneath the deepening sky, had been a torrent of raw, unvarnished emotion. "Sarah," he'd begun, his voice hoarse, "I can't pretend anymore. I'm falling for you. I know it's crazy, I know it's impossible, but I can't stop thinking about you. Every time you're here, the whole house feels brighter. And when you leave—" He trailed off, squeezing her hand gently. I feel it, Sarah, don't you?" The warmth of his palm against hers was a searing brand, and a thrilling tremor ran through her. Yes, she felt it. She felt it in the tightening of her chest with every glance he sent her way, in the quiet joy that blossomed when he spoke her name, in the yearning that echoed deep within her soul. It was a sensation she'd never encountered, a powerful current threatening to sweep away everything she'd ever understood about her life. "David," she managed, her voice barely a whisper. I feel it too." The words tumbled out before she could restrain them, a confession as profound as his. The relief that washed over his face was palpable, a dazzling smile replacing his earlier apprehension. He brought her hand to his lips, a tender kiss that sent shivers through her. But even as joy threatened to overwhelm her, a cold dread began to seep in. The implications of their shared feelings loomed like a stark, formidable wall. She was Amish. He was English. Their worlds were not meant to intertwine in this fashion. A relationship with David would mean abandoning everything she had ever known, her family, her faith, her community. It was a chasm too wide to bridge without immense sacrifice. She looked at David, his eyes alight with hope, and felt a profound sadness mingle with her burgeoning happiness. His hand remained clasped in hers, a silent promise of a future that, for her, was fraught with unimaginable consequences. The evening air suddenly felt heavy, laden with the weight of unspoken dilemmas and impossible choices. She had confessed her truth, and in doing so had opened a door to a path she was not sure she could, or should, ever take. A fiery rescue. A sudden acrid smell pierced the quiet hum of the sewing room. Sarah, bent over a particularly intricate lace detail on the bodice, frowned, her needle pausing mid-stitch. She sniffed the air, a faint metallic tang mixing with something sweet and sickly. Her gaze drifted to the small, ornate lamp on the work table, its bulb radiating a gentle warmth. A flicker, barely perceptible at first, danced at the base of the lamp. Then a tendril of smoke curled upwards, thin and wispy as a spider's silk. Her breath hitched. Before she could fully register the anomaly, a tiny flame blossomed, licking at the fringed edge of a silk scrap she'd left too close. The silk, delicate and dry, caught instantly. In a terrifying instant, the flame grew, its orange tongue greedily devouring the fabric, sending a plume of black smoke towards the ceiling. Sarah gasped, her heart leaping into her throat. Her hands flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and dawning horror. The wedding dress, a cloud of ivory silk and lace, lay spread across the larger table, perilously close to the spreading fire. Panic, cold and sharp, seized her. She fumbled for the small pitcher of water she kept for dampening fabric, but her hands trembled so violently she nearly dropped it. The flame, fueled by the rich silk, now danced higher, reaching for the tulle overlay of the dress. A guttural cry, more animal than human, escaped her lips. Just as the first lick of fire threatened to scorch the delicate lace of the skirt, the door burst open. David, drawn by the faint scent of smoke and Sarah's strangled cry, stood framed in the doorway, his eyes instantly taking in the scene. His expression, usually so composed, contorted into a mask of pure alarm. Without a moment's hesitation, he surged forward. "Sarah, move!" His voice, usually a gentle murmur, was a sharp command that cut through her terror. He didn't wait for her to comply. In 3 powerful strides he was beside her, his arm sweeping her behind him with surprising strength, pushing her clear of the immediate danger. His focus, intense and unwavering, shifted to the dress. With a speed that belied his usual calm demeanor, he grabbed the heavy velvet throw from the nearby chaise lounge. He didn't try to douse the lamp. The fire was already too big, too close to the masterpiece. Instead, with a powerful, practiced motion, he threw the velvet blanket over the burning silk scraps, smothering the flames with an efficiency that spoke of an innate instinct for crisis. A hiss, a final puff of smoke, and then silence, broken only by the ragged sound of Sarah's breathing and the frantic pounding of her own heart. David dropped the singed blanket to the floor, his chest heaving. He turned to Sarah, his hands immediately reaching for her, his eyes scanning her face, then her arms, searching for any sign of injury. "Are you all right? Are you hurt?" His voice was rough with concern, laced with a fear that resonated deep within her. Sarah could only shake her head, tears pricking her eyes. She was unharmed, but the sheer terror of the moment, coupled with David's swift, protective actions, had overwhelmed her. Her gaze, still trembling, fell upon the wedding dress. Miraculously, it was unscathed, saved by mere inches and David's quick thinking. A wave of relief, so profound it almost buckled her knees, washed over her. "The dress," she whispered, her voice still shaky. It's all right." David followed her gaze, his own breath visibly easing. He reached out, his fingers gently brushing a fold of the ivory silk, as if to confirm its safety. "It's fine," he murmured, his voice softer now, tinged with a lingering adrenaline. "You're fine. That's what matters." He looked back at her, his eyes dark and deep, holding hers. The air in the room, still thick with the lingering scent of smoke, crackled with an unspoken intensity. In the aftermath of the near disaster, their connection, previously a delicate, unspoken current, solidified into something undeniable, something palpable. His protective ferocity, the raw concern in his eyes, had stripped away all pretense, all boundaries. He had not just saved the dress, he had saved her from a terrifying moment, and in doing so, had laid bare the depth of his feelings. Sarah swallowed, her throat suddenly dry. She saw not just the rescuer in front of her, but the man who had confessed his love, the man whose actions had just echoed that powerful declaration. Her own heart, still thrumming with residual fear, now beat with a different, equally potent emotion, a soaring, aching gratitude that entwined inextricably with her love for him. He stepped closer, his hand reaching out, not quite touching her, but hovering, a silent question in his gaze. "What happened?" he asked, his voice low, his concern still etched on his face. "The lamp," she managed, gesturing weakly towards the scorched silk on the floor. "A spark, I think. It caught the fabric." The words felt hollow, inadequate to describe the terror she had felt. He nodded, his jaw tight. "I'll get rid of this lamp. It's clearly not safe." His gaze lingered on her, a silent assurance passing between them. No words were needed. In the smoky aftermath, their unspoken feelings had become an undeniable truth, binding them even closer than before. He had acted out of a profound care, not just for the dress, but for her, and she had felt it, deep in her soul. Worlds collide. A knock, gentle yet insistent, pulled Sarah from a daze of half-formed thoughts about smoldering silk and a hand grasping hers. Her heart gave a guilty lurch as she recognized the familiar silhouette through the frosted glass of her workshop door. Bishop Jacob Yoder, his broad-brimmed hat a somber halo against the bright morning. Beside him stood Sister Martha, her face etched with a kindness that, today, felt like a heavy weight. She opened the door, her voice a reedy whisper. "Bishop Yoder, Sister Martha, please come in." The bishop's gaze swept over the opulent fabrics, the half-finished gown shimmering on the mannequin, before settling on Sarah. His eyes, usually twinkling with stories, held a quiet solemnity. "Sarah, child, we came to see how you fare. Brother Daniel mentioned he hasn't seen you at the midweek gathering for some time." Sarah's cheeks burned. I have been very busy, Bishop. The dress for the English wedding. It is a grand commission." She gestured vaguely at the shimmering silk, a silent plea for understanding. Sister Martha's voice was soft, like worn linen. We understand the demands, Sarah, but our duties to the Lord and to our community, they must come first. The Lord asks us to keep the Sabbath holy and to gather in fellowship. Her eyes, though gentle, held a knowing sadness. We hear you have been spending much time here, away from home. Are you well, child? Sarah twisted her hands, the rough texture of her apron a grounding force. I am well, Sister Martha, just... the work is absorbing. The words felt thin, transparent. She couldn't tell them about David, about the shared glances, the stolen moments, the spark that now flickered within her, threatening to consume everything she knew. Bishop Yoder placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch light, paternal. Sarah, your gifts are from God, but we must use them in accordance with His will and the ways of our people. The world outside, it can be distracting. It has different values, different temptations. His gaze lingered on a discarded fashion magazine, its glossy pages a stark contrast to her simple life. Remember who you are, Sarah. Remember your promises. Guilt, sharp and cold, pierced through her. She was Amish. She belonged to this world, to these people, to these simple, unwavering truths. Yet, a different truth was blossoming within her, a forbidden flower pushing through the fertile ground of her heart. She murmured her apologies, promising to attend the next gathering, promising to be more diligent. But the words tasted like ash. As they departed, their quiet counsel echoed in the suddenly silent room, leaving Sarah adrift in a sea of confusion and shame. Meanwhile, across the expansive estate, a different kind of storm was brewing. David found his mother in the solarium, amidst an explosion of orchids and exotic ferns, sipping tea from a delicate china cup. The air was thick with the scent of jasmine and unspoken tension. "Mother, we need to talk," David began, his voice tight. Eleanor Miller sighed, setting down her cup with a faint clatter. "David, if this is about your sister's wedding, I assure you everything is under control. Sarah is doing a magnificent job with the dress." "It's not about the dress, Mother. It's about Sarah. And it's about us." He paced, the polished marble cool beneath his bare feet. "You don't see her, do you? Not really. You see a seamstress, a quaint Amish girl. But she's so much more." Mrs. Miller's elegant brows arched. "She is a talented young woman, David, and she is Amish. We respect her traditions, her faith. But I fail to see what that has to do with us." "It has everything to do with us. Don't you understand what's happening here?" David stopped, turning to face his mother, his eyes blazing. "I care for her, Mother, deeply." A brittle laugh escaped Eleanor. "Care for her? David, please. She's from a completely different world, a world where they reject everything we value. Our ambition, our education, our very way of life. It's a passing fancy, a misguided infatuation. You're lonely, and she's intriguing. She's genuine. She's kind and intelligent and more real than anyone I've met in years." His voice rose, resonating with a frustration that had been building for weeks. "You judge her based on her clothes, on her background, but you don't even try to see her heart." Mrs. Miller rose, her posture rigid. "David, I understand you're feeling protective, but you are a Miller. You have responsibilities, a future. You will marry someone who understands your world, someone who can navigate the complexities of our life, not an Amish girl who would be utterly lost and whom you would eventually resent for her limitations." "Her limitations? Or your prejudices?" David countered, his voice raw. "What if I don't want that world, Mother? What if I want something simpler, something truer?" Eleanor's face hardened. "You're being foolish, David. This connection, whatever you imagine it to be, is impossible. It will only bring heartbreak to both of you, and it certainly will not bring anything but scandal to this family, especially with Clara's wedding so close. You need to end it. Now. The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken threats. David stared at his mother, a chasm opening between them, wider and deeper than any cultural divide. He saw not concern, but a rigid adherence to expectation, a fear of anything that deviated from their carefully constructed reality. The battle, he realized, had only just begun. The garden's choice. The wedding dress, a cascade of ivory silk and lace, hung suspended from a tall stand in the antechamber, a luminous sentinel awaiting its wearer. Sarah ran a hand over the intricate embroidery she had painstakingly stitched, the threads a testament to countless hours and a burgeoning internal conflict. Tomorrow, Eleanor Miller's daughter, Charlotte, would wear it, gliding down an aisle to a future Sarah could only glimpse through a frosted pane. And then, Sarah's commission would be complete. Her time in this opulent, bewildering world would end. A quiet knock at the door, barely audible above the rustle of the silk, made her heart leap. It was David, his tall frame filling the doorway, his eyes, that familiar, intense blue, meeting hers. The unspoken weight of their situation settled between them, a tangible presence in the lavish room. "The dress," he said, his voice a low murmur. "It's magnificent, Sarah." She offered a small, hesitant smile. "It is finished." "We need to talk," he continued, his gaze unwavering. "Meet me in the rose garden in 10 minutes, the one by the west wing." Sarah nodded, her throat suddenly tight. The garden, where their connection had first blossomed amidst the formal beauty, now felt like a crucible. 10 minutes later, the scent of damp earth and late-blooming roses filled the air. Dusk was settling, painting the sky in hues of deep violet and fading orange. David was already there, standing by a stone bench, his hands clasped behind his back. The tension radiating from him was palpable. "Sarah," he began, his voice rough with emotion as she approached. Tomorrow the wedding happens, and then you leave." She looked at her hands, clasped tightly in front of her. "Yes, my work here is done." The words felt hollow, inadequate. He stepped closer, closing the small distance between them. "Is that all it is to you? Just work?" His voice was a raw plea, stripped of its usual charm. Sarah met his gaze, the depth of her own feelings reflected in her eyes. "No," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You know it's not." The silence that followed was heavy, punctuated only by the distant chirping of crickets. The choice, stark and unforgiving, hovered between them like a physical entity. "What are we going to do, Sarah?" he asked, his voice low, urgent. I can't imagine you just walking away, disappearing from my life." Her chest ached with a familiar pain. "David, my life, my people, Bishop Yoder, Sister Martha, they know I've been away, disconnected. They watch, they talk." He reached out, his hand hovering inches from her arm, then dropped it. "And what about us? What about what we feel?" "It is forbidden," she stated, the word tasting like ash. "You know this, my faith, my commitment." "Is it truly forbidden if it feels so right?" he countered, his voice rising slightly, tinged with desperation. "Is God truly so cruel as to allow a connection this deep, only to demand it be severed?" Sarah flinched, the question striking at the very core of her dilemma. She believed in her God, in the tenets of her community, in the path laid out for her. But David had ignited something within her, a fire that threatened to consume all her carefully constructed certainties. "If I stay," she began, her voice trembling, "I lose everything, my family, my community, my place in the world I know." "And if you leave?" he pressed, his blue eyes searching hers, piercing through her carefully maintained composure. If you go back and pretend this never happened, what do you lose, Sarah? What do we lose? The question hung in the cool evening air, an unanswerable riddle. She envisioned her quiet, ordered life in the Amish community, devoid of David's laughter, his thoughtful observations, the warmth of his presence. It felt like a landscape bleached of all color. She imagined a life with him, vibrant and unpredictable, but forever shadowed by the profound loss of her heritage, her very identity. A single tear traced a path down her cheek, cool against her skin. "I don't know," she confessed, her voice thick with anguish. "I don't know what to do." David stepped forward then, gently taking her hands in his. His touch was warm, comforting, yet it also intensified the ache in her heart. "We have to choose, Sarah, tonight, before tomorrow comes." A heartbreaking farewell. The scent of crushed roses hung heavy in the air, a sweet counterpoint to the bitter ache in Sarah's chest. David's hands, warm and firm, still held hers, his thumb tracing the delicate bones of her wrist. His gaze, usually so steady, was clouded with an urgency that mirrored the storm gathering within her. "Sarah, please," he began, his voice a low murmur that seemed to vibrate through her very being. "Don't go. Don't walk away from this, from us." He gestured vaguely at the twilight-draped garden, encompassing their shared moments, their burgeoning feelings. "I know it's different, unconventional, but I swear to you, I would honor your beliefs, your faith. I would learn, Sarah. I would understand." Sarah's throat tightened, a knot of sorrow making it difficult to breathe. She saw the sincerity in his eyes, the raw vulnerability that he rarely displayed. He was offering her a world she had only glimpsed, a life painted in vibrant hues she hadn't known existed, a life with him. The temptation was a physical ache, a yearning so profound it threatened to unravel her. "David," she whispered, her voice reedy and thin, "you don't understand. It's not just beliefs. It's who I am. It's my community, my family. It's every sunrise, every hymn sung, every stitch I've ever sewn. It's in my bones, David." A tear, hot and stinging, escaped and tracked a path down her cheek. To leave, it would be to shed a part of myself, to become someone else. He stepped closer, his free hand reaching out to cup her face, his touch gentle, almost reverent. "But what if that someone else is who you're meant to be? What if this—" He paused, his gaze sweeping over her tear-streaked face. "This feeling, this connection we share, is God's will too. A different path, perhaps, but a righteous one." His thumbs brushed away her tears, leaving a trail of warmth. "I can change, Sarah. I can adapt. I'd learn to live simply, if that's what it takes. Anything, for you." His words, earnest and desperate, were a siren song, threatening to pull her under. She saw the life he painted, a life where he, David Miller, wealthy and worldly, would kneel beside her in prayer, would learn the rhythms of her quiet existence. For a fleeting, agonizing moment, she imagined it, imagined a hand-in-hand journey through a world where their two lives somehow intertwined. But the image, though beautiful, felt fragile, almost impossible. "It's not fair to you, David," she choked out, another tear falling. "To ask you to give up everything you know, to live a life that is not yours. And it's not fair to my people, to walk away without a backward glance, to break the covenant I've made since birth." Her voice broke on the last word, a raw sob escaping her lips. "I cannot." The word hung in the air, a cruel finality. David's hands fell from her face, his shoulders slumping, and for the first time, she saw the hope drain from his eyes, replaced by a profound sorrow that mirrored her own. The vibrant color of the roses seemed to fade, the air growing colder. "So this is it," he said, his voice flat, devoid of its earlier passion. You're choosing them, your faith, over us. It wasn't an accusation, but a statement of heartbreaking fact. Sarah nodded, unable to speak, the action a wrenching admission. The choice had been made, not in this moment, but in countless quiet decisions throughout her life. Her feet were rooted in the soil of her heritage, and though her heart yearned to fly with him, her soul demanded she stay. He took a step back, the distance between them growing wider with each beat of her aching heart. I understand, he said, though his eyes betrayed the lie. I don't like it, but I understand. He reached out, his hand hovering, then gently stroked her cheek one last time. I will never forget you, Sarah Stoltzfus, not a single moment. Her own tears flowed freely now, a testament to the profound grief that gripped her. And you, David Miller, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Never. The silence that followed was deafening, punctuated only by the distant chirping of crickets. He turned then, his silhouette stark against the deepening twilight, and walked away, disappearing into the shadows of the rose garden, leaving Sarah standing alone amidst the fading scent of crushed blooms, her heart shattered into 1,000 irreparable pieces. Her commission was complete, her time in the English world at an end. Her journey back to her world, however, felt like a journey into an emptiness she hadn't known could exist. The wedding day. The crisp autumn air carried the scent of wood smoke and late-blooming roses. It was a perfect day for a wedding, the kind of day that felt plucked from a dream, bathed in the soft golden light of a setting sun. Sarah stood a little apart from the smattering of other guests, near the edge of Mrs. Miller's meticulously kept garden, her gaze fixed on the unfolding scene. Her plain gray dress and white cap felt like a stark contrast to the riot of color and finery around her. She was a ghost in the vibrant tableau, an observer from another world. Then Clara appeared, framed by a trellis adorned with ivy and white flowers, and a collective gasp rippled through the onlookers. Sarah felt a jolt, a strange mix of pride and aching sadness. The dress, her dress. It shimmered, a cascade of ivory silk and delicate lace, catching the sunlight in 1,000 tiny gleams. The intricate beadwork on the bodice, each pearl sewn with painstaking precision, sparkled like dewdrops. Clara looked ethereal, radiant, a vision of pure joy. Her usually lively face was softened by a veil that cascaded over her shoulders, and her smile, wide and genuine, lit up the entire garden. Sarah had poured her heart into every stitch, every seam, weaving her skill and her quiet hopes into the fabric. To see it brought to life so magnificently, adorning a woman so clearly happy, was a powerful, bittersweet reward. She watched as Clara took her father's arm, her movements fluid and graceful, a living testament to the hours Sarah had spent ensuring the fit was flawless. The fabric flowed around her, whispering with every step, a testament to its quality and Sarah's meticulous hand. It was beautiful, undeniably so, a masterpiece of her craft. And it was finished, done, like a chapter closing, irrevocably. Her eyes, perhaps drawn by an invisible thread, drifted across the assembled faces until they landed on David. He stood near the front, handsome in a dark suit, his gaze fixed on his sister. A slight breeze ruffled his hair. As Clara drew closer to the altar, David shifted, and his eyes, as if sensing her presence, lifted from his sister and found Sarah's. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. There was no grand gesture, no overt acknowledgement, not a flicker of a smile or a nod of greeting. Their connection was too deep, too raw for such trivialities. Instead, a wave of understanding passed between them, a silent conversation that spoke volumes. In his eyes, Sarah saw the echo of their last painful goodbye, the raw wound of unspoken words, the ghost of a future that would never be. She saw the longing, still present, still potent, but tinged with a weary resignation. He saw her, the woman who had captivated his heart, standing on the periphery, a part of this world yet not truly in it. Sarah's own gaze held a similar sorrow, a quiet acceptance of the path she had chosen, but also the lingering ache of what she had relinquished. She offered him a fragile, almost imperceptible tilt of her head, a silent acknowledgement of their shared secret, their shared loss. It was an apology and a forgiveness, a farewell and a promise, all wrapped into one fleeting, intense glance. It spoke of shared laughter, whispered confessions, and the undeniable pull that had threatened to unravel her entire world. David's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, his expression unreadable, yet Sarah knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that he understood. He understood her choice, even if it shattered him. He understood the love that remained, even if it was now forbidden. The moment stretched, shimmering with unspoken emotion, until a gentle tug on his sleeve from his mother, Mrs. Miller, broke the spell. He turned his attention back to the ceremony, his shoulders squaring, his profile once again impassive. Sarah watched him go, a singular tear tracing a path down her cheek, quickly absorbed by the white fabric of her cap. The wedding music swelled, a joyous, triumphant melody, but to Sarah it sounded like a lament. The dress was perfect. Clara was beautiful. But the threads of her own heart felt irrevocably tangled, a masterpiece unfinished, a promise unkept. She had woven a dream for another, while her own remained a tattered, beautiful regret. A quiet return. The rhythmic clip-clop of hooves on asphalt was a balm to Sarah's ears, a soothing counterpoint to the city's lingering hum. Seated in the buggy, hands demurely folded, the simple muslin of her dress was a soft, grounding presence. With each passing mile, the landscape outside the open buggy transformed. Manicured lawns yielded to expansive fields, brick mansions to humble farmhouses, the ceaseless stream of cars to the gentle sway of trees. Yet her mind remained tethered to another scene. David's eyes, flashing across the crowded reception hall, a silent plea, a shared understanding of grief. The surprising warmth of his hand, the unexpected tenderness of his gaze, his patient listening, a quality she hadn't known existed beyond her own community. The opulent English world, once a distant, almost mythical concept, had become intimately real, colored by the vibrant spectacle of Clara's wedding and the muted ache of an impossible affection. A sharp, sudden pang pierced her chest. Not regret, not entirely, but a profound sorrow for what could not be. Their connection, forged in the quiet intensity of fittings and shared moments, had been a fragile, exquisite blossom. It had unveiled a reflection of herself she hadn't known existed, a woman capable of inspiring such deep devotion, whose heart could ache with such longing. She recalled the intricate lace of Clara's gown, the delicate pearls, each stitch a testament to Sarah's prodigious skill. But it was the invisible threads, woven between her and David, that truly defined this commission. That dress, a masterpiece of her craft, now felt like a silken shroud for her own unspoken yearnings. As the buggy turned onto the gravel lane leading to her family's farm, the air filled with the earthy scent of damp soil and honeysuckle. This was home, a sanctuary of ordered simplicity, where life's rhythm was dictated by seasons and faith. Still, she sensed a subtle shift within herself, an imperceptible deepening. The outer world remained unchanged, but she was not the same. The boundaries of her understanding had expanded, not fractured. She stepped down from the buggy, her movements fluid and unhurried. Her mother, Hannah, emerged from the house, her face etched with a familiar concern that softened into relief. "Welcome home, Sarah. Did all go well?" "Yes, Mama. The dress was lovely. Clara was very pleased." Sarah's voice was steady, betraying none of her internal tumult. She picked up her small satchel, its familiar weight a comfort. Later that evening, in her attic room, moonlight casting long shadows across her quilt, she allowed herself to truly feel the echoes of the past weeks. The memory of David wasn't a burden, but a quiet companion. It was a bittersweet truth. Some loves were meant to be experienced, not possessed. They shaped you, refined you, then released you, leaving behind a new understanding of self and world. She contemplated the challenges ahead, the gentle inquiries from her community about her time in the English world, the expectations of eventual courtship and marriage within the Amish faith. Before, these prospects had seemed a natural progression. Now, they felt different, viewed through a prism of newfound complexity. She knew she would embrace her life, her faith, her community, but she would do so as a woman who had seen beyond the familiar, who had touched a different kind of beauty, a different kind of love. The experience had not shattered her faith, but rather deepened her understanding of human connection, of sacrifice, and of love's myriad forms. It was a secret garden in her heart, tended with quiet reverence. David would always reside there, a cherished memory, a testament to a path not taken, a love that transcended worlds. She picked up a piece of unfinished embroidery, her needle flashing in the dim light. The intricate pattern began to unfurl under her skilled fingers, a testament to the enduring beauty of creation. Her life, too, would continue to unfold, stitch by careful stitch. It was a return, yes, but not to the Sarah who had left. She was the same, yet irrevocably altered, carrying within her the quiet strength of a love that had bloomed in the most unexpected of places, a love that would forever shape the masterpiece of her own unfolding life. The world outside her window was still and peaceful, a vast, star-dusted canvas. She was home, truly home, but with a heart expanded, a spirit subtly refined. The journey had ended, but the transformation had just begun.